Warning, may contain heroin addiction, 5-MeO-DMT, magic ingredients, and/or peanuts. I am Woodstock.
So for anyone who doesn't get to watch the video, we are in a picturesque backyard that looks like a botanical garden.
Yep.
And it's amazing. So again, thank you very much for coming on. As I mentioned on the phone, my very good friend, he reached out to a few places because on previous conversations, I'd been speaking to people about mental health, depression, anxiety, and a few of them, whether it was on the mic or off, they brought up different types of substances that are illegal, like psilocybin is one that came up a lot, DMT. I did speak with someone who does some treatment with ketamine, and I am not experienced in these things. I've been around people who have used them quite a bit. I myself have used them recreationally at times over the years, but it never occurred to me that it was something that was a powerful medicine to help with things that right now are becoming very apparent that the entire United States is suffering with.
Yeah, huge.
So when I reached out to you, I was very excited to hear a little bit of your story. And I want you to tell everyone that's listening, what was it that got you to where you are today? So tell us first, who you are and what your organization is and what you do, and then what got you to this point.
Okay, I'm Casey Marie Mitchell. I am a psychedelic integration specialist focusing on life transformation and holistic addiction recovery. And I've served as president of Portland Psychedelic Society for the last year and a half. And I am now currently just a board member, which I'm pretty happy not to have that big responsibility. My organization that I will be launching is the Psychedelic Integration Collective. And I work with individuals coaching for preparation and integration of psychedelic experiences. I also help people learn how to use the medicines for microdosing practices that are effective for whatever it is that their intentions are. I'm mom of 3 kids. I've been in recovery from alcoholism for coming up on 39 years. So I'm active in 12-step, but I'm also active in another organization called Psychedelics in Recovery. That is breaking my anonymity, but I'm okay with that. So I could probably go on and on.
Well, that's the great thing about long-form conversations is we can go on, and there's nothing stopping us. One thing I really like to kind of go into the conversation with is what catalyst was it that put you to the point where you wanted to try something that currently in the United States is still illegal, right? So I was talking to a friend of mine that he was discussing his depression, and it got to the point where him and his wife said, I don't care what it is, I need something, and what they currently have to give me is not helping. I don't care if I'm breaking the law. Did you have a point in your life to where when was the first time you actually heard of psychedelics in the use of a medicine?
The first time I heard about it was from my friend Tyson Elliott, and I knew him through the 12-step programs, and he started working with an organization called Crossroads in Baja, Mexico, and they were an organization that did ibogaine treatments for detox. They also did psychospiritual treatments. Ibogaine is a medicine from the iboga plant, and there's a protocol that people use for detox from all addictions except for benzodiazepines. So I was, in this abstinence-based program and had this, mindset of psychedelics are bad. or, they're addictive. There's something, not good about them. And so as he started getting involved with this clinic, I started becoming more and more interested in it. And he ended up like using MySpace as, we would jokingly refer to it as Crossroads corporate headquarters. And he did sales from there. We'd, have some meetings there. And I also had the honor and privilege of having clients stay at my home on their way down to the clinic and, on their way back after they had their experience. And the stories that I saw were amazing. I mean, people who were hardcore heroin addicts, like 10 days later, 7 days later, completely free from withdrawal, happy, joyous, upbeat, excited about living. So that's what hooked me.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's not a guaranteed result, but I saw it enough to where it like, this is something to look into. And, the group speak or, mindset that was against psychedelic medicines, it's like that got quieter and quieter as I started learning about these stories.
So Ibogaine one where I'm not familiar with at all. Do you know how that interacts with your body, what the mechanisms are?
Not the scientific part of it.
Okay. What's the experiential side of it?
Well, for people who are going through detox treatment, like 30 minutes after they take the Ibogaine, like I'm talking specifically heroin addicts, 30 minutes, 60 minutes after they take the Ibogaine, they are literally free of withdrawals. And I mean, I won't go into the whole experience of a journey with Ibogaine. It is one of the, I would refer to it as one of the darker medicines. I mean, people have darker experiences with Ibogaine, sometimes like really horrifying, nightmarish kind of experiences. I've heard, other people where they talk about being taken back to, the beginning of time on the planet. And they're shown, how everything was, developed and, built and created. And
sounds like a biblical story.
There are, I mean, it's pretty unpredictable as far as the specific experience. I mean, people will connect with their ancestors. They'll connect with the spirit of Iboga. So but it is one of the medicines that, you have to be careful with it because it can cause a lowered heart rate. So it can potentially give people heart attacks. So if somebody's doing there's flood doses. There are low dose Iboga treatments. So there's a Ibogaine flood dose, which needs to be done under medical supervision. You have to have testing done with your heart and your liver, and drug testing. You can't have any amphetamines in your system if you're going to do an Ibogaine flood dose. So it's not one of the common psychedelics, and people do have to be very careful with it.
And at this clinic down in Baja, what year was this?
You're gonna ask me to go with the timeline.
Give me a rough one. The exact one.
Okay, I can't tell you the year, but it was about 8 years ago.
Okay.
About 8 years ago.
So pretty recent.
9 years ago. Yeah.
And so, did you personally decide to go down to the clinic and experience it?
No, I have a medical condition that doesn't allow me to do that. I have done some low dose Iboga treatments, I've used low dose Iboga. I've microdosed with iboga. Not one of my more favorite medicines.
So at the time, though, you had never experienced any psychedelics. This was your first, I guess, introduction to it, used as a medicine. Yet now you're in a position where you've dedicated your life to, and I'm using psychedelics generally. I don't know if that, I guess the name of the organization where I found you is the Portland Psychedelic Society. So I guess that's an accepted term for just various different plant medicines. So was it that experience that drove you to completely change your life and dedication to a different way of life?
Yes. So first was the observation of it. I'm a pretty cautious person. And so, just watching and the observation. And in these clinics, a common protocol that people use is they'll have the ibogaine flood dose, and then they'll do a treatment with a medicine called 5-MeO DMT.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely medicine.
So describe to people what 5-MeO DMT is.
5-MeO DMT is a medicine that comes from the Sonoran desert frog, which is actually endangered. So there are synthetic forms of it that people can use now. And it is referred to as the God molecule. And it is a medicine that creates a journey like no other. You are, when people experience what's referred to as a breakthrough journey, they are, transported instantly into this space of bliss, love, absolute. It's like it's nothingness and everything at the same time. And total, complete connectedness and alignment with whatever you want to call it, God, spirit, the all that there is. And so the ego is completely dissolved. The ego referring to all of our life strategies, awarenesses, things that we need to do to keep ourselves safe. You are completely without any of that and without any need for it. Most people, when they come back from the journey, there's no words to describe it. They do not have the words to describe it. There is, people are just, the first time I experienced that medicine, I was just in such a place of just pure gratitude and connectedness. And there was no questioning or wondering about anything. It's like, oh, everything really is in perfect divine order. So it's in a total, complete experience of that.
Whew. That was a description.
And I do have, I have an event with some of my friends with PPS on September 8th called All Things 5-MeO DMT. So we're going to be talking a lot about that.
So the Baja Clinic, they would do, you said flood?
Ibogaine flood doses.
Ibogaine flood doses, which you didn't feel comfortable with due to just pre-existing health conditions, which I think is very wise and smart. Which is why I would never say, hey, go out and find stuff and do it, even though it may be beneficial. And then next day, they would bring out the 5-MeO DMT.
A couple days later.
A couple days later.
So there
it was always in conjunction, or okay.
Yeah, and oftentimes people would say that the 5-MeO DMT journey was the thing that really, people will call it curing, but that got them to the place where they didn't feel they were addicted anymore.
That's interesting. Yeah. I don't have any personal experience. I don't have any close friends that I've been able to pick their brains that have gone through like a heroin addiction, then used ibogaine to get off. So all I have is different references I've heard online, and it sounded like there's a really good success rate with ibogaine, but that it's not a forever cure all. They could always just go back, but it does help them. So that's interesting that using the 5-MeO afterwards and having an experience like you just described may potentially take away that desire to go back to it. I don't know.
Well, can I talk about addiction treatment for a minute?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the 12-step movement, has a set of steps, a process that people go through. And, after they go through this process, they are supposed to be having a spiritual awakening, right? And as a result of living a certain spiritual path. So what I talk to people about, when I was more involved in coordinating treatments, is that with the ibogaine and the 5-MeO DMT, it's kind of a backwards situation where people will have this spiritual awakening as a result of using these medicines. But you still have to do the work. So you still have to do maintenance. And, if you've had a lot of wreckage in your life as a result of an addiction, there's cleanup to do. And some shifting of, habits and mindsets and behaviors to be able to continue to support that spiritual awakening. One of the reasons I got so involved with the preparation and integration coaching is because of the experiences that I had with people who thought that this medicine was just going to fix them, that they would be able to go down and get an ibogaine treatment and then they would be cured forevermore. And that is not the case. There is still, people need to have preparation work and then have what I refer to as a lifestyle of integration to be able to continue to support this higher level consciousness that they connected with.
I had a conversation with an addiction therapist. She deals specifically with people who had trauma, and she would argue that most addiction is caused because people are trying to cover the pain from past trauma, whether you know that you had trauma or not. And
yeah, I would agree.
And knowing that, and then knowing what I do know now about psychedelics, how when I was talking with Nadia the other day, she was talking about how psychedelics have the ability to kind of almost shove your face in your past issues that you're just not, maybe it's subconscious, you didn't even know, but it has the ability to pull that little curtain away where you've been hiding all of this junk that you've been carrying with you your whole life. And maybe it's not the drug that actually cures you, but it's the drug that is the ability to actually see, and whether you like it or not, you're going to deal with it because you're in this trip for the next few hours. And so you're forced to have this experience, and dealing with those experiences is what quote unquote cures you or helps you not have to go back to that drug, whether it be alcohol or heroin or whatever, because you're not covering a pain anymore. You've dealt with that pain. Does that sound about what, how would you respond to that? I'm just piecing this all together from conversations I've had, and I'm a novice at this time.
Yes. Yes, that that is one way that it works. An introduction to a connection with Spirit of the Universe, undeniable connection to Spirit of the Universe, could be another part of it. But yes, the trauma resolution is extremely important, whether with all mental, my opinion, all mental health issues and addiction, particularly addiction. Gabor Mate is one of the leading teachers with trauma-informed treatment for addiction, and for mental health disorders also. And he says that you will never find an addict or an alcoholic without an unresolved trauma. And, I mean, trauma, that's a whole other subject, because it can be, uh, like major traumas. Or it could be somebody that you would ask them and they'd say, oh, well, I had a pretty good life. I didn't have much trauma. And so it doesn't really matter so much as what the event was, as the experience of the individual, or the experience the individual had with the event. And, most certainly there are people that are, much more severely traumatized than others. But, I've seen, like, across the board, people with really serious traumas and, like, extreme traumas, and, live relatively normal lives now.
Really good at hiding it. Or coping.
Coping. I mean, you will find, like, every single, any story in every story. The more people you talk to about, trauma-informed addiction recovery, and using psychedelics for that. So what you were asking about with, with a psychedelic trip, the only way out is through. And yes, it's like, once you take the medicine, you're in it. You are in it. And, sometimes the experiences can be, really dark and very difficult. And, sometimes they can be, a little bit more playful. You can have some darkness, you can have some light, so it varies. This is where the importance comes of having community to be able to connect with, so that you can integrate the experiences. And, if someone is having a difficult experience, or if they're having some deeper issues that they're wanting to have resolution with, my own personal opinion is important to have a person that you're working with one-on-one to do that integration work. Because I've known of people who have been traumatized with their psychedelic experiences, due to a lack of an effective integration of it.
Yeah, I've talked to people that they had expectations going in that were not met, and they said they will never do it again. And
yeah,
I'm worried that we have such a powerful tool and we don't know how to use it, and so it's causing actual harm, actual issues, because we don't have enough knowledge around it. Because let's talk about the legality of it. Mm-hmm. Have you gone into a deep delve on the history of why these drugs are on a Schedule 1 right now?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Can I give a couple of resources for people to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. One of them is a book by Johann Hari. It's called Chasing the Scream. And he lays out the history of the, quote, war on drugs, very well. There is a podcast that I came across recently. It's Scraps, Skrapps, and they have a whole series on psychedelics and the war on drugs, and there's some of the information they have on those episodes is a little triggering, so just be aware of that. Because some of the testing that was done with LSD, in prisons and in some other places was, it's a little disturbing. So in 1970, there was the Controlled Substance Act that was put in place by Nixon. And if you look at the history of it, so psychedelic medicines were put into the Schedule 1 category, which means that they have no medical benefits and that they are have a high potential for abuse. And that's not true about the psychedelic medicines at that time in the 1970s. So probably from the 40s through the 70s, there was a lot of research that was being done, specifically, well, some with ibogaine, but a lot of it with LSD for treatment for mental health conditions, as depression, and for alcoholism and addiction. And it was working, and they were getting really good results. And when that Controlled Substance Act went into place, it's like all of that research was immediately halted. So, I could go into my opinions about.
Please do. That's the great part about this.
I believe that the Substance Control Act was put in place to have control over populations of individuals. At that time, these people, there was the hippies, right? So there was this huge movement, and people were using LSD, and they, free love, but they were literally having spiritual awakenings and being able to see through a lot of the bullshit that was happening, with government, with their own families, with just everywhere. And coming into a place where what they wanted to do was live uniquely from their authentic self, and which our culture really doesn't allow for that. And there were a lot of protests. I mean, people were just kind of out of control.
Yeah.
And so, a way that the government could control that population of people was to, enable this Controlled Substance Act. Again, in Johann Hari's book, he goes into the details of that. When they're when opium was taken off, because it used to be available, over the counter for people. But then there was also the opium dens, with the, Chinese people who were here. And, there's, argument that shifting, opium into a controlled substance and having it be only available through doctors was, partially to control this population of people, because then that would give them the ability to, go into these opium dens and have this viewpoint that these people were criminals. So, yeah, Johann Hari's book is really good.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I've seen a few different. I mean, there's insurmountable evidence that what you're saying is true. I don't think anyone that's really looked into it can disagree. It's just blatant that there was a misuse of power back then, and unfortunately, it's taken 50, 60 years to the point where I tend to think that more and more people are open-minded about it. Part of the reason why I wanted to travel, again, I'm from Texas, and I've gone through most of the United States now, traveling to people talking to people from all over the place. And I've been shocked. I've been pleasantly surprised how open-minded people have been about the fact that more and more individuals are seeking help of these things that are, I mean, it makes them felons. It's weird saying it that way. I don't think it's correct, but I really was disheartened when I spoke to a congressman and I asked him, what's the general consensus amongst most legislators? And his response was pretty much, oh, we don't even talk about it. It's not even on our radar. Yeah. Yet to so many people, it's a matter of life or death. I can't express enough how much pain I've heard from people that have opened up to me about how people who have taken the leap and done something illegal, how much it helped them.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the other people that are just terrified, they're not willing to take that leap, and for good reason. You know, most of them are parents. I myself am terrified because someone could potentially come knock on my door.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your personal opinion on speaking to those people, whether you're a parent or it doesn't matter who you are, you're a human being that's terrified of the law, but are desperately in need of some sort of help, and this is something that they could potentially help them. What steps do they take?
Research. There are it's amazing what's happening right now. I mean, the lid has been blown off of keeping the secret on psychedelics. It is incredibly impressive. So, Portland Psychedelic Society, we have a YouTube channel that all of our presentations are uploaded to. I've run 7 support groups per month throughout the pandemic, where people can come and share their experience and ask questions. I mean, there are all kinds, addiction related, some women's support groups, integration circles. We have a microdosing discussion group. So, I'm not condoning the use of illegal medicines, but I am condoning people doing their own research and making their own decision about it. There are so there's the decriminalized nature movement that's taking place now. So there's a number of cities where where psychedelic medicines are decriminalized. So you can go onto their website and get more information about that. Michael Pollan's book, talking about his experience with psychedelic medicines, is really good. Disclaimer there, people do come away with the thought that, I'm going to do one psychedelic journey and then I'm going to be okay. I was like, no, that's not how it works. It takes work, preparation and integration. But, do your research. And there are so many more resources available now, if you just start looking and keep an open mind. There's studies being done at Johns Hopkins University. There's studies being done everywhere. UC Davis. There's studies being done with some ibogaine, synthesized ibogaine for addiction treatment. I think Mind Cure up in Canada, they fund some research. There's research being done, that's funded by them. I don't remember the name of the organization, but it's by Deborah Mash on ibogaine. MAPS is an organization. Look up them. It's the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic. Yeah.
I've heard of MAPS.
Yeah,
that one's very
MAPS.
credible. They're I think they're a big one pushing MDMA. Is that correct?
MDMA, they've done studies. I don't know if they're doing one now with psilocybin. I think they are. But yeah, MDMA, big, huge, gigantic. So that one, MDMA has been fast-tracked for treatment for PTSD. And, there's lots of underground providers that have been working with this medicine for years. And then, the indigenous practices, the medicines with, psilocybin and ayahuasca and iboga. I mean, we're talking thousands of years that there have been, indigenous cultures using these medicines. And, now we're just trying to figure out how to fit it into our Western world. Treating these Western world illnesses and diseases. And, so it really is taking a shift, a pretty drastic mindset shift for people. Because it's not like a pill that you take and then you're supposed to get better. It just doesn't work like that. And that's the mindset that a majority of, Western medical minded people have. And because when you're, having a psychedelic journey, I mean, it's like on every level. We're multidimensional beings. And for us to get well or get better, we need to address all of these different levels of our being. So yeah, research, open-mindedness, and, don't experiment with it until you feel safe and comfortable. And you're willing to, and at this point, it's really not that big of a risk. I'm just gonna say that.
Depending on which substance you use and where you get it,
Depending on what substance,
and maybe that's
and who you are, and what your circumstances are. Professionals who are, tested.
Oh, when you say risks, not a risk legally, as far as getting.
I'm talking about a risk legally.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's really important to be well educated on, enough to where what preparation is, what integration is, and that's what I teach people. That's what I want people to come away from, after they've, worked with me, for a couple of months. If they, come away from, one of my groups, that they're on the path for becoming educated about this, knowing what the medicine is, knowing what contraindications there are, knowing, what dose would be good for you. There's like something referred to as a heroic dose of psilocybin, which is like 7 grams. Which,
oof.
Yeah.
I was talking to Nadia. She says it's very, very interesting. I asked her about dose, if they have a specific dose they always go with. She said, oh, absolutely not. It depends person to person.
Yeah.
So, well, how do you determine that? And she said that it's the only way is by feel. It's by getting to know the person, by speaking with them, and then trying to figure out what it is. And she said it's drastic, anywhere from 0.3 grams to 5 grams. She said they limited at 5. The heroic dose, 7. I have friends who have done 3 grams and have not lost their mind, but figuratively speaking, they went on a journey. Let me put it that way. So what I don't want is for someone to hear this and then they go and pick up a mushroom off the ground and just down it. We all know that there's lots of different types of mushrooms out there. Some of them are incredibly deadly. I think you already answered what I was going for. Research, because I'm certain there's a place nearby, anyone that's listening to this, that they can find safe product or plants, whatever you want to call them. But the hard part is I guess you just have to trust yourself to do the research, because there is a lot of, with anything that's very powerful, I think there's a potential good and a potential harm. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think we need to have a large respect for these things, because they are incredibly powerful. And I don't know if legalizing it is the best way to do it, because as we've seen with marijuana, it's a lot more accessible, but it's also, I don't know, I'm afraid if they legalize it, that it's going to be drowned out by what's always happened with, the big pharma right now. They've taken lots of these drugs. So like heroin, for example, we make it legal. We take down these opium dens, and then we give people the ability to sell that same exact drug, but altered a little bit, and they stamp their name on it. And now we have an opium epidemic, an opioid epidemic.
Oh yeah, and with the criminalization of it, you also have this whole, and again, in Johann Hari's book, he talks about how it created this whole criminal underground for for moving these drugs. This is a huge. I mean, we could talk hours just about this, because there's there's the decriminalized nature movement, right? And so they're saying, look, these medicines, this is nature. This is like stuff that you can go get in the wild.
You can grow in your backyard. You can grow in your house.
Yeah. Ayahuasca, of course, you can't grow that here, but their argument is that it's nature, and we should not be put in jail for for using nature. And I was looking at actually this morning, looking at the different schedules, the drug schedules, right? And the thing is that so like LSD, psilocybin, I mean, it is, you cannot overdose and die on these things. The stories that you hear about, like, people jumping out of windows and going crazy, permanently insane. Those are like, I mean, I have never even heard of like somebody that I know of that happened to. People can appear to be insane while they're in a psychedelic journey, but that relates to a poor set and setting, which is mindset and environment, lack of preparation, lack of using the medicines consciously and responsibly. But my point is that the benefits of psychedelic medicines far, 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 far outweigh any of the negative that you would be able to come up with. So, and if you take that compared to the opiates, right? So the potential, I mean, the danger of using opiates, and the Suboxone, or any of the medicines that contain those for pain relief. I mean, you look at the horrendously awful results of the opioid crisis. Devastating. It's like there's just absolutely no comparison.
Millions of people.
Millions and millions of people's lives that are affected. I mean, people innocently, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of, a kid in high school having an injury, sports injury, starting to take, oxycodone, and, they get a prescription of 30 pills for it. And after that, literally, they're addicted. They're chemically dependent on these medications. I could go on and on about stories with that. And people end up going to the street and becoming heroin addicts. And if you look at the whole, Sackler story about how these medicines were, about how they were marketed, and the experiments that they did with marketing. I mean, that's criminal.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, we're only one of 2 countries in the world that allow direct marketing to consumers from pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. That says a lot.
Yeah. But what's fabulous about what's happening right now, so they were referring to this time as the psychedelic renaissance. And there's so much research being done. So there's the, there's the, legal medical research that's being done, but the social experiments, the underground, the social research that's being done is really incredible. And that's the stuff that I get to hear about with all of these people.
Do you feel comfortable talking about some of your own personal experiences with different substances?
Sure.
I had a friend ask me, like, everyone who describes it, they're always like some dude, and they're like, bro, it was just like, oh my gosh, but they have no way to actually verbalize it. So he's like, maybe someone with a brain can describe what it's like.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
You did a great job with 5-MeO-DMT. What are some of the other psychedelics that you think are worth looking into, and how they're different as far as the actual experience while you're on that journey?
Well, the most accessible medicines are, I would say, psilocybin, LSD, and probably MDMA. And let's throw ketamine in there too, because ketamine is actually, that is a medicine. It's not considered a classic psychedelic. It's actually a dissociative. It's an anesthetic. Ketamine is. But it is being used for treatment of depression. That's one of the main things that people will, or these clinics will market it for. But there are clinics like popping up everywhere, ketamine clinics. Again, preparation and integration is so important. A lot of these clinics, like they don't really know what they're getting themselves into because they're looking at it from a medical mindset. So ketamine is one of the ones that's being used legally right now. I'm sorry, I'm going off. You asked about the different medicines.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you be able to walk us through like the experience that you had on different substances that you used? I think it's very fascinating to me.
Yes, I can do that.
So psilocybin, you said that was one of the more common ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me personally with psilocybin, so a deep dive journey for me is between 3 and 4 grams. And in the beginning, it's usually very uncomfortable, like very uncomfortable. And, a little nauseous and, a little shaky. I don't know why I always feel shaky in the beginning of a deep dive journey with, if it's ayahuasca or psilocybin. And with my last journey, and with a lot of journeys, I have pretty significant emotional release with tears, crying, just crying. And that really deep, very satisfying, sobbing kind of crying.
Yeah.
I'll just be, transparent. The last journey that I did, the reason that I did it was because of my depression. So it was about a year ago, I think, this month, and I had experienced a crisis with this gland disorder that I had. So I had been really, really sick for a couple of months, and that brought on, or part of that was severe depression. And I have had on and off throughout my life different bouts of chronic depression with suicidal ideation. And that was the place that I found myself in last year. And, not a lot of people knew exactly how bad it was. And that's another part of depression, I think, is that people do have a lot of shame around that, and thinking that they're the only ones. And so I knew that a deep dive psilocybin journey would lift that. I got the physical stuff taken care of. I was well as far as that went, or not well, but better. And so I, asked a friend to sit with me for this psilocybin journey. And through the journey, I just had this experience of all the mistakes. So all the mistakes, all the shame that I had about myself, and all the mistakes that I thought I had made. And how did I end up in this situation? And then it went into the world. So, the setting, of course, is the world pandemic last year.
Ugh.
Right?
Yeah.
So I had this awareness of like, oh my God, it's not just me. Look at all the mistakes everywhere that everyone, this is fucking awful. And then I was lifted into a place of like, everybody makes mistakes. It's like what we do. It's just what we do. And it's not really a mistake. We're just learning. And we try things, and, the great democratic experiment, right? We're trying this thing out. And it's just what we do. And there's no shame in it. And everything works out in the end. Everything works out. Everything is always working out. And I got to celebrate me during that journey, see all the things that I've done, I'm 57 years old. I've done a lot of stuff. All the people that I've helped, I've raised 3 kids, and, been married, I'm divorced. Just like this slideshow or movie of like all of this great stuff that I've done. And this deep, deep gratitude. I just experienced this incredibly deep gratitude and acceptance of everything. Everything. So that was my last journey. And you know what? I didn't want to die after that. And I was happy. And I was upbeat. And I was engaged in my life. So yeah. That's a psilocybin journey.
I was talking to an old econ professor, and he was talking about how as elders, we usually get to a place in life where we can show all of our successes, and we hide all of the darkness that we struggled through along the way, and we're doing a disservice to the youth by not sharing that. And I think if we had people saying, yeah, everyone has depression, it's terrible, it's awful, but there's a way through it. Mm-hmm. My childhood would have been more, at least manageable. And so thank you for being vulnerable and opening up and sharing, because I think it's becoming more and more apparent that we all have a lot of stuff that we need to all deal with. And if we think we're alone, that just makes it a lot scarier.
If we think we're alone, it makes it a lot scarier. It makes it so much worse. There's the shame and judgment. It just makes it worse and worse and worse. And I think it's important for people to know that they don't have to be alone, and they don't have to suffer, that there is a solution. I mean, psychedelic medicines are, for me, it's a big part of what I do just because I'm so involved with the community. I do microdose, which helps with, with my depression, and but it just like helps me be a better me. And you know, I want people to know that, it's not a magic pill, but it can be like the magic ingredient for their life to start getting better. And, right now, with, the PTSD, from frontline workers, I mean, we've all had trauma. We've all been traumatized, right?
Absolutely.
With the economy, just recently what the eviction moratorium is off now. So, I mean, we just don't know what's going to be happening. I'm sorry, my dog's barking in the back.
Oh, half of my episodes have dogs barking in them, so that's
Really?
just par for the course. Yeah.
I think that the people in the house left, and so she's.
And your cute one here, the size of a chipmunk's climbing on me.
Oh.
Adorable.
She might let you pick her up. Well, she actually would. But if you try to pick her up, she'll back up. It's her game. She would love to be sitting on your lap right now, though.
So your description of psilocybin was amazing. What about, have you experienced MDMA? Because that's one that I've been told doesn't really have much of a dark side, where psilocybin, you do go through a journey. You're going to have some bad trips. MDMA, at least in my experience, is always positive. Have you experienced that before?
I've used low dose MDMA with a psilocybin journey. So I haven't used it in higher doses, but yes, that is, I would say that that's an accurate description of MDMA.
Because you brought up MAPS. I think that's one of their big pushes, is to try to at least, whether they're taking it off of Schedule 1, at least getting it to the ability to where they can actually start studying and getting data on it, specifically for PTSD, because there's been almost miraculous results through vets who have left a little puppy. For anyone who can't see the video, it's the cutest dog in the world sitting in her lap.
This is Callie. This is the healer puppy. Huh? Yes. So MAPS is doing, they're in the third stage trials for legalization of MDMA for treatment of PTSD.
And the little I heard is they're looking for actual trained therapists who can get another certification to be able to use MDMA in their treatments as well. Do you know anything about that?
Well, they train therapists, so they have a training. They have a training for therapists that are doing these research studies. Right now, I believe it's the Portland Therapy Center. So they're doing, I think they have 5, or they have space for 5 people. Actually, it might be going already. They have space for 5 clients who would fall under the research. They have the research treatment. But so there's ones where it's paid for, that MAPS is doing, and then there's a handful that people would actually need to pay for themselves for the treatment. So there's some great stuff going on, but I think the target date is 2023 for legalization of MDMA for treatment for PTSD. Now, the thing that happens is that once it's legalized or once it's FDA approved for one use, then it can be used for other purposes. So like ketamine is an anesthesia, right? But they have found that it's like really amazing for treating PTSD, depression, addiction, alcoholism. So there's these clinics that are actually using it for that. So you can use it for, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but you can use it for, a purpose that it's not actually FDA approved for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you for full legalization of all substances, or are there certain substances you think we still should highly regulate?
So ultimately, I think that these substances should be legalized.
All of them across the board?
No, I wouldn't necessarily. So the psychedelic medicines, I don't want to commit to an opinion on that.
Okay, that's fair.
There's so much going on right now with, so there's a Plant Medicine Healing Alliance, and they're trying to move some legislature through the city council, and then there's the Decrim Nature and Decrim Nature Portland. So there's a couple of differences between, the text of what they're trying to get pushed through the city council. There's the subjects of sustainability. So you make 5-MeO DMT legal everywhere, right? You have the Sonoran desert frogs. So what they do is that you get the frog and then you milk their gland and then dry the venom, and the 5-MeO is created from that. Well, they're already endangered right now. So if you legalize it across the board, it's like no more toads, really.
But you said you can synthesize that now?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so it can be synthesized.
Well, I guess would that fall under like decriminalizing nature? Would that include, say, ketamine or MDMA or 5-MeO? It would just be shrooms, marijuana,
mushrooms,
and
LSD,
ayahuasca.
Mushrooms. It really doesn't. I'm not sure about.
Well,
cannabis.
LSD itself is synthesized as well too.
Yes.
I know it comes from the fungus ergot, but.
So I'm pretty sure Plant Medicine Healing Alliance includes LSD.
Okay.
I'm not sure about. I think Decrim Nature does too. But yeah.
So NMDMT, which is ayahuasca, right? I hope I'm saying that right. I need to look that up. Is it NMDMT, the one that's in ayahuasca?
Yeah, so they just say DMT.
Okay, and then the 5-MeO DMT is the Sonora frog?
Sonoran desert frog.
Sonoran desert frog.
Yeah.
Someday I will be educated about these things.
You know what? There's so much. There's a lot.
Well, that's what when I started going to a real deep dive, there's these huge books that were written like 300 BC on just pharmacology and these different plants and what they do. Apparently there's thousands of different drugs that are psychoactive that we just they're not public knowledge, but no one talks about them. But it really starts to make me wonder, like, what are we missing out with if we have such huge potential with healing with just a few of these drugs? I'm excited to where we get these to where we can start studying them, and we just simply take the stigma away, because if there is a dark side, let's expose it and educate people about the dark side and allow the positive side to just start racing forward.
I agree 100%. And just like with DMT, just on that note, DMT is found in everything. We have it in our bodies. It's in plants, it's in shrubs, it's in trees, it's everywhere. It's in everything. So, it's like, oh, well, if DMT is everywhere and it's in our body and our bodies actually produce it, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. Right?
Which, I'll be honest, that's one where I want to try to track down while I'm here in Oregon, because it is decriminalized everything in Oregon, right? Now, is that accurate or no?
Well, yes. Well, a friend of mine, he says, well, it's defelonized.
Defelonized. Where you can still go to jail for it and get a big fine.
Well, no, you can get a fine within for certain amounts. I mean, of course, if you go over that amount, then it's a different story. But there's, small amounts have been defelonized, because you can still get $100 ticket for it, but you can, if you do get a ticket, then you have the option of having a health assessment, which is freaking awesome, because that means, and then they're creating these programs for and this is under Measure 110, and they're creating these programs for treatment. Now, what's really cool about that is that there's Dr. Angela Carter, who is on the board of advisors for the psilocybin assisted therapy licensing. She's on their advisory board, and she was just hired with OHA for a certain area of the implementation for Measure 110, which is treatments for addiction. So I am excited to see what happens as far as being able to integrate the psilocybin assisted therapy into treatment for addiction.
That's very exciting.
Isn't that exciting? Yeah.
I fully had plans to search out something while I was here, but I'm with my family, and it's still, I don't know where to go. I'm not local. It's still like the stigma in me is so strong that I'm like, I'd be a terrible dad if I went looking for drugs while my kids were and then I think about the conversation we had. I'm like, well, why is that bad? And so that's why I'm trying to get this all on the microphone, because if it's bad, it's bad, but we need to talk about it and tell me why it's bad, and we need to discuss the actual actions versus what we've been kind of brainwashed to understand our whole lives. And I'm not through it. I still have this bias and preconceived notion of what is good and bad, and I'm working my way through it. But I'm like, can I really go be knocked? I don't even know where to start, first off, but I'm only going to be here for the next few days. So sorry, listeners, if you're really excited for me to do DMT on the microphone, it's probably not going to happen. But
well, maybe we'll figure something out to bring that experience to your listeners. We'll see what happens. But what I do want to say about that, what you're talking about right now, is what I tell people is that your journey starts the minute you set the intention for having an experience with a psychedelic medicine. So everything that happens from that time that you set the intention is part of your growth experience.
I like that.
Yeah. But that's part of this like whole, this preparation and integration. It's like, you can't separate it out. Like we're multidimensional beings. You can't just intellectualize and, say, oh yeah, this is what happens on a psychedelic journey. Like, I mean, I told you, but it's like when I was towards the end of my journey, my last one, I was just cracking up laughing about, it's like, it's crazy to think about integrating this. It's like when you're in that space, that higher level consciousness, it's like, that's ridiculous to try to think about how you're going to come down into 3D world and talk about it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So it was like, I'm an integration specialist. I run groups on it every month. And, and here I am in the journey thinking, well, that's a joke. Yeah. So your journey's already started, my friend.
So before we end this, I I'm a family man. I got a 7-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old daughter, and my wife and the kids. We've all been traveling around together. You mentioned that you had children. Are they very supportive of your path working with psychedelics?
Absolutely. They love their mama.
Have you gone on journeys with them?
No, I have not.
Would you recommend doing it with friends and family?
Uh, I know of a lot of people who have done that, and it can be very, very beneficial. I know families that it's just part of who they are and what they do. Of course, 7-year-olds, I wouldn't recommend that. I would
Yeah.
have to say it's like, 18, 21. But yes, my kids have a lot of respect for me and for my path. I've had some hard patches of road in my life. And, this is not one of them. And, they think they have a pretty cool mom.
Well, I think they have a pretty cool mom as well. Thank you so much for spending the time to sit down with me and open up. I think this is a important topic, and the more that people are educated about it, I think they're going to start to realize that it's something that needs to be talked about, in an important setting. We're going to start having real conversations in person with people. That's one thing that I'm kind of realizing is, as I've started this journey with the podcast, I have been doing them 100% in person, and the cathartic nature of it is immeasurable. Especially in light of this pandemic where we've been so separated from people. Humans are not meant to be alone, and technology it's a sad substitute for communicating. We had a conversation with a friend, and how he was talking a lot more educated about it than I do. But when we have an in-person communication like this, there's actually a chemical dump in our brains that they've studied that you don't get that when you're online. And so it's almost like chasing the dragon. It's like you're online and you're going for this like social dump. You want this reaction to what you typically have when you have a human reaction, but you're not getting it. So then you dive deeper, and then before you know it, you're on forums for QAnon, supporting something that's just completely potentially dangerous, and it's definitely not getting you moving on in life and upwards and onwards.
Yeah, I think the internet communities that we connect with, it's very important to be mindful about the rabbit holes that we go down with those. I'm really happy with the rabbit holes that I go down with, with my amazing communities. But yeah, I'm so happy for you that you've been able to, live this passion of yours, or find this passion, right, of podcasting and being able to connect with people in person. And yes, I also am I'm a massage therapist and an intuitive healer, and the absence of physical connection with for people, it's been devastating. The people that my heart really goes out to are the ones who not only have been cut off from their normal physical interactions with their community, but have not had the ability or the desire to connect with people virtually through technology, where it's like, all of a sudden they've been in this cave for months and months and months and months. So anybody out there that happens to be listening to this, I really encourage you, because it looks like we've got a little bit more ways to go here. But I would encourage you to take the leap to get connected with communities that are online. So Portland Psychedelic Society, San Francisco Psychedelic Society. There's, more and more psychedelic societies popping up across the world.
And then use that connection to make a physical connection with someone in real life, IRL, as they say online.
I love that.
Because that is that in and of itself is a healing medicine, just being with people and sharing yourself.
It is. We had our first in-person gathering at the park with Portland Psychedelic Society about a month ago. And it was really quite glorious to be with people in person after I've been with a lot of these people for a year and a half online. Yeah, it was really cool.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll definitely be keeping in touch. Now that I know this exists, I'm definitely going to be coming back to Oregon at some point, doing another tour around, and I want to see where your journey's gone from here.
Likewise, I will be interested in seeing where you journey.
All right, thanks everybody.
Hey everybody, the conversation is getting bigger and bigger, and I want to invite all of you to join in. There's a few ways to do it. You can go to iamwoodstock.com, that's iamwoodstock.com. There you'll find a contact form where you can input your email and contact me directly. You can also go to the I Am Woodstock Facebook page to leave comments and start a conversation with the entire IAW community. If you're a fan of pictures, check out the I Am Woodstock Instagram, where my wife is sharing some of the family adventures. If you're enjoying the show and want it to grow even more, go to the Good Stuff page on my website. There you'll find links to all of my sponsors, as well as a link directly to the I Am Woodstock Patreon, where you can become an official patron and allow me to be picky about the sponsors I choose. Thank you all for the support, and don't forget, this is all about starting real conversations. If you're driving in your car, call up a friend who you haven't seen in a while and discuss some of the topics you've come across on the show. Trust me, you will not regret it. See you next time.